Hello, it's Emily here at Textile Express, and today we are going to be making the gorgeous Frankie wrap skirt by Made Label. And this is a free pattern that they have on their website, but also check out their other patterns because they have some really gorgeous dress and skirt options. So far I've made the Dusky Rose dress and it is beautiful. So we started off choosing which fabric to use for the wrap skirt, and we've gone for this really gorgeous soft drape floaty fabric, which will be perfect for the ruffles on the skirt. It's just going to hang so beautifully. This is a free downloadable pattern, so it will require some sticking together. If this isn't something that you're familiar with, then check out our reel or our short on YouTube. Just gives you a little quick lesson on how to assemble your patterns. Once you are done assembling and sticking together your pattern, then you can begin to cut out all of the pattern pieces, just as you would with any other pattern. You will be given a layout guide as to how to position your pattern pieces across your length of fabric. It's really important that you pay attention to this, otherwise you may not be able to fit all of your pattern pieces on your length of fabric. Also, on pieces such as this skirt section, you may need to cut them on the fold. So it's not very clear here, but Pavo has just placed that piece on the fold. So the fabric is doubled over, so that gives you a piece of fabric twice the size of your pattern piece. Make sure that your pattern piece is well secured to the fabric before you begin cutting, either using pins or pattern weights. This is particularly important on slippy or floaty fabrics like we're using here. Moving on to the second pattern piece, you will see that this one says it is a mirror cut rather than cut on the fold. So we're still cutting through 2 layers of fabric while it's folded over. That's to make sure that we get one piece for each side of the skirt. Once we've finished cutting out the pattern, we're going to move on to step 1. So we're taking the back panel piece for the skirt, opening that out, and we're going to attach that to the front side pieces of the skirt using a French seam. Now, if you're not familiar with sewing a French seam, then we have a separate tutorial on how to do this, but we will show you in detail in this video as well. So you're going to start by sewing the pieces wrong side together, which I know seems strange in comparison to sewing a standard seam, but this is a French seam, so all of your raw edges are hidden. You're going to sew the first seam so that was wrong sides together, allowing for a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Once you've finished sewing the side seam, then you can trim away the excess fabric from the seam. So this just keeps your French seam nice and neat and prevents it from becoming too bulky. Once you have trimmed away the excess fabric from the seam, you're going to flip the fabric over so it now is face side to face side, and then you're going to re-sew along this seam, allowing for a 0.5 centimetre seam allowance this time. This should ensure that all of the raw edges are encased in your French seam and you're left with a really tidy seam. You'll see once you're finished, you're left with a really beautiful tidy seam. You can then repeat this process with the other front panel on the opposite side of the skirt. Moving on, we're going to start sewing together the main frill for the skirt. So this involves sewing together 4 of these U-shaped pattern pieces. Again, we're going to use our French seam to sew these together to keep them all tidy, and you'll need to just join them along this short edge where Pavo is going to point out now. So you'll sew along those 2 short edges and join all 4 pieces together. Then once you've joined the 4 pieces together, at either end you need to add on the top frill, which is the piece that you can see being unpinned now. So this has just a slightly different shape to finish off the frill, so it's got a tidier join at the top. So you'll have 4 U-shaped pieces with these little comma-shaped pieces sewn on at either end. When you're sewing your French seams, if you're using a fabric like us that isn't the easiest to distinguish the front from the back, you can always use a sticker or just something to distinguish the face from the back, just to make sure you don't get those mixed up while you're putting in your French seams. Once they're all sewn together, then you should have 6 pieces sewn together. So 2 of those top frills and 4 of the U-shape main sections of the frill. Now we need to start hemming our frill. So this will be going against the longer edge of the giant U-shape that you've just created. Now you can create your hem by doing a really tidy little double fold. Now this can be tricky because it's on a curve, but you can get a foot for your machine to help with this. So you can use a rolled hem foot. On a Janome machine this would be foot D, but I'm not sure on other machines, I'm afraid. In the footage that we've got here, we're just using a standard foot, and there's no reason why you can't do that. You just need to take your time and carefully work your way around the hem. But if you do have that rolled hem foot, which do come complete with quite a few machines, it just really helps to get a tidy finish in a much quicker time. The next step is to join the frill onto our main skirt pieces. So first of all, we're going to find the halfway point in the back panel of the skirt. So line up your 2 joins where the side pieces are attached to the back piece, and then using a little bit of chalk or a pin, just mark that center fold. This is so that you know that you're placing your frill in the correct position on the skirt. Once you've marked that center of your back panel of the skirt, you can line that up with the center of the frill, which will of course be a seam because you've sewn together 4 U-shaped pieces to make that frill, plus the 2 little edge pieces. And then work your way around and pin the whole of that frill in place. There's no need to do any gathering. Your frill will naturally form because of the way that the pieces have been cut in that great U shape. Don't forget, we're still sewing a French seam when attaching the frill onto the skirt, so we're going to start off by sewing wrong sides together and then repeating that process that we've already done on the frill and sewing the side panels to the skirt to create your French seam. The next step is sewing the waistband for the skirt. Now the waistband on this is assembled from 3 pieces, and we're going to start off sewing the 2 shorter pieces together using the French seam. You should then label this piece up as your short piece. You will also have your longer piece, and this piece can be labelled up as the long piece. We are now going to sew the short piece onto the long piece. Now this is going to be sewn using a standard seam, no French seam here. Once you have pinned your pieces together, you can begin to measure down the seam, marking every 2 centimetres as you go. This will create the hole for where the waistband tie will pass through. This seam will be sewn with a 2 centimetre seam allowance, so it may be useful to mark this also. Once you have marked your piece, you need to sew 2 centimetres, then leave a 2 centimetre gap, then sew another 2 centimetres, then leave a 2 centimetre gap, and then finally sew that last 2 centimetres. This will mean when the piece is folded in half to create the waistband, it will leave space for a hole. Once you've finished that sewing, then you can take this piece over to the ironing board and iron open the seam so it's nice and flat. Once folded in half, you can see the hole that's created for your tie fastening to pass through. The next step is to line up the seam that it contains the tie hole in the waistband with the seam that joins the back panel of your skirt to the left-hand side front panel of the skirt. Pop a pin in place to hold these together, right sides together. Then work your way along the front left panel of the skirt until you get to the point where the frill joins onto that panel. Then mark that point on your waistband tie. From that point, measure a further 6 centimetres along the waistband tie and make another mark on the waistband. Repeat this process on the right-hand side of the skirt. Once you have finished making all of your marks on the waistband, you can unpin it from the main part of the skirt. You are now going to iron the waistband in half, starting at that last point and working out to the very end of the tie. You need to iron face sides together. Then, at the very end of the tie, cut at a neat 45-degree angle to create a tidy finish at the end of the tie. Next, you need to sew around the tie, starting at the pointed end until you reach that mark that you placed on the waistband earlier, 6 centimetres from where the waistband will join onto the skirt. Don't forget to stop at this point, otherwise you won't have any way of joining the waistband onto the main part of the skirt. Once you have sewn both ends of the waistband in this same way, then you can turn them right sides out and give it a press. Next, you need to press in a 1 centimetre seam allowance on the section of the waistband that is open. Now we need to re-pin our partially sewn waistband onto the skirt in the same position that we did before. So we're matching right sides together, starting with this section of the waistband where the hole is for the tie and working our way towards the outer edges of the skirt. Don't forget to stop pinning once you get to the frill. Then, once pinned in place on the one side, you can take this to your machine and sew all the way along. This can be sewn using the standard 1 centimetre seam allowance. Once you have sewn the first half of the waistband, return to where the hole in the waistband is and begin to fold the waistband in half, tucking under that 1 centimetre seam allowance that you have already ironed into place. As you're folding it in half, pin the waistband in place to hold it securely, ready for when you sew. You will then top stitch this in place to give a really tidy finish and join the waistband to the skirt. The final step is just to add some stitching around the tie hole for a little bit of extra support so that you don't get any ripping or tearing of the stitching or fabric once it's in use. Well done, you're finished. You've made your own gorgeous Frankie wrap skirt by Maid Label. We hope you enjoyed this video.